The red banner at exactly 8:15 a.m. on a quiet Thursday, my biometric login chimed green, routine, uneventful, familiar. But the dashboard that appeared a heartbeat later was anything but routine. Instead of my standard liquidity reports and corporate ledgers, a violent red banner dominated the screen. ASATF RIS Federale Farm 668A Outstanding Balance Year 550. For a full 3 seconds I simply stared at it. I'm 34 years old, a senior forensic data architect who makes a living dissecting financial ecosystems for multinational corporations. I track invisible money trails across continents. I reconstruct collapsed audit chains for companies worth billions. I do not forget to file taxes. I certainly do not accumulate $500,000 in federal liabilities. I didn't panic. Panic is inefficient. Instead, I downloaded the official notice attached to the levy. The document was clinical and merciless. According to the Department of the Treasury, I was listed as the sole proprietor and guarantor of two high-volume e-commerce entities, Apex Trading LLC and Nova Global Logistics. Over the past 3 years, those companies had processed nearly $3 million in revenue. None of it reported to domestic tax authorities. There was only one problem. I had never heard of them, but I knew someone who had. My younger brother Trent, 29, serial entrepreneur, leased matte black G-Wagon, designer watches, endless dinner table monologues about tax, optimized structures and digital empires. He had recently boasted about scaling 2 e-commerce brands internationally. I closed the PDF and leaned back in my chair. He hadn't discovered a loophole. He had stolen my identity, using my social security number, my pristine credit history, and my compliance, clean profile. He had registered shell corporations and routed offshore merchant accounts under my name. He built his empire on my financial skeleton, and when the tax liability surfaced, it detonated on me. I did not cry. I opened my secured terminal. Within minutes, I began reconstructing the registration telemetry, IP logs, timestamp correlations, digital signature mismatches, routing metadata from offshore processors, VPN billing records. I wasn't guessing. I was building a digital autopsy. The first red flag appeared quickly. The VPN used to register the LLCs masked the IP to my home state, but the subscription payment traced to a personal credit card, Trent's credit card. He thought encryption meant invisibility. He forgot that systems leave shadows, billing nodes, device identifiers, behavioral patterns. By 9:12 a.m., I had compiled enough preliminary evidence to know this wasn't sloppy paperwork. It was felony, grade fraud. I encrypted the data onto a titanium hardware, secured flash drive and slipped it into my blazer pocket. Then I drove to my parents' house. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the atmosphere was offensively normal. My mother arranging flowers. My father reading a golf magazine. Trent sitting at the kitchen island, typing on his laptop like the world belonged to him. I placed my phone face down on the marble countertop and rotated it toward him. The red levy notice glowed between us. He didn't flinch. He leaned back casually and sighed. "Relax," he said. "It's just an automated compliance hold." My CPA was filing extensions. My voice was level. "You registered shell corporations under my social security number." My mother stepped in immediately. "Victoria, drop the interrogation tone. Trent just needed clean credit to process payments. It's family." "Family," my father added. "Set up a payment plan. Clear it quietly. Don't ruin your brother's funding round." Funding round. They weren't shocked. They were inconvenienced. Trent smirked. "If you try to blame me, the registrations are in your name. The signatures match. The IP traces to your state. You have zero proof." Zero proof. That's when the heavy brass door knocker echoed through the foyer. 3 sharp, deliberate strikes. Trent grinned. "Your attorney." I walked to the door and opened it. 2 individuals in dark suits stood outside, identification lanyards bearing the gold seal of the Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division, Victoria Ashford, the lead agent asked. Yes, I replied calmly. You're right on time. And as I stepped aside to let them in, I realized something important. This wasn't about taxes anymore. It was about evidence, and I had brought more than enough. But what Trent didn't know was that the real trap hadn't even been opened yet. The biometric trap, the arrival of federal investigators, does not come with sirens or cinematic chaos. It comes quietly, with measured footsteps and controlled breathing. Agent Miller and his partner stepped inside my parents' foyer with the calm precision of professionals who had already decided how the day would end. They did not smile. They did not remove their shoes. They did not acknowledge my father's attempt at authority. They walked straight into the kitchen. The room changed temperature instantly. My mother's hands froze over the flower arrangement. My father stood up too quickly, the golf magazine slipping from his grip. Trent remained seated, but the smirk was gone. My father recovered first. Agents, thank goodness you're here, he began, projecting his usual commanding tone. This is a misunderstanding. My daughter is under stress. There's a minor tax discrepancy. We're arranging private repayment. Agent Miller did not look at him. We are not here to negotiate a payment plan, he said evenly. We are responding to a priority 1 escalation involving synthetic identity theft, federal wire fraud, and offshore revenue concealment exceeding $3 million. My mother inhaled sharply. Synthetic identity theft, that's absurd. He just borrowed her credit profile. He's family. Borrowed. I let the word hang in the air. He didn't borrow my car, I replied. He used my social security number to anchor unreported offshore revenue. That's a federal felony. Trent finally stood. She's lying, he said quickly, voice thinner than usual. Look at the Treasury file. The companies are registered under her SSN. The digital signatures match her employment profile. The IP addresses traced to her state. It was a clever defense. Use the fraud itself as proof of innocence. Surface level audits arrest names. Deep audits arrest patterns. I unbuttoned my blazer and removed the titanium flash drive. When I placed it on the marble countertop, the metallic click echoed like a starting pistol. Agent Miller looked at it. What's on this? He asked. The architecture of the fraud, I replied. Including the mistake? Trent stiffened. Mistake? He repeated. Yes, I said calmly. You routed your IP through a VPN server in my state when forming the LLCs. That masked the location. Smart. His jaw tightened. But you paid for that VPN subscription with your personal Visa card. Silence. Agent Miller's eyes sharpened. You extracted the billing telemetry. Yes. Trent laughed too fast. That proves nothing. I let her use my card for software. I ignored him. Agents, I continued, to open high-tier offshore merchant accounts linked to U.S. citizens. What is required under Know Your Customer compliance? Live biometric verification. Agent Miller replied immediately. Government ID held in frame. Trent stopped breathing. I turned to Miller. Please open the folder labeled KYC submissions. He inserted the flash drive into his encrypted tablet. The kitchen fell silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. 2 taps. A file opened. Agent Miller's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. He rotated the tablet so everyone could see. On the screen was a high-resolution compliance photograph. Trent sat at this exact kitchen island, wearing the same cashmere sweater, smirking, and in his hand, my United States passport. The passport I had reported missing a year ago. My mother gasped. Trent, what is that? He didn't answer. My father stepped forward quickly. We can resolve this. I'll write a check. I'll liquidate stock. $500,000, immediately. I shook my head. You cannot purchase your way out of synthetic identity theft and international revenue laundering. It's just unpaid taxes. My father snapped. No, I said quietly. It's structured concealment of offshore funds under a stolen identity. Trent tried one last maneuver. You can't connect the $3 million to me, he said, voice cracking. Offshore wallets are encrypted? I looked at him. I don't need to connect the money to you, I said evenly. I only need to connect the hardware. He froze. Agent Miller looked up. Hardware? Yes. Every time someone logs into an offshore processor, the system logs the device's unique MAC address, unalterable, hard-coded into the network interface. Agent Miller's posture shifted. You extracted the MAC identifier and cross-referenced it, I said, turning slowly toward Trent's laptop resting inches away. With the router logs from this house. The silence became suffocating. The MAC address routing $3 million in concealed revenue, I finished softly, is permanently embedded in the motherboard of the silver MacBook sitting in front of him. Special Agent Davis moved without hesitation. 3 steps. He shut the laptop, slid it into a metallic-lined Faraday evidence bag. Trent lunged instinctively. You can't take that. Davis pushed him back firmly against the refrigerator. That device is now federal evidence. My mother began to cry. My father's confidence evaporated, and for the first time that morning, Trent looked exactly like what he was. Not a visionary, not an entrepreneur, but a man who had just realized his empire had a serial number attached to it. Agent Miller secured the bag and glanced at me. Is there anything else we should know, Miss Ashford? I held his gaze. Yes. There's one more transfer. And this one was about to destroy more than just my brother, because the money didn't stop with Trent. The $250,000 mistake, the kitchen no longer felt like a home. It felt like an evidence chamber. Trent was pinned against the stainless steel refrigerator, breathing like someone who had just discovered gravity. The Faraday bag containing his MacBook rested on the marble island like a silent verdict. But this wasn't finished. You mentioned another transfer. Yes, I said calmly. 6 months ago. A domestic wire. $250,000. My father stiffened. The shift was subtle, a tightening around the eyes, a swallow that came too quickly. I'd seen that micro expression before. It's the look executives make when they realize the audit won't stay contained. That transfer, I continued, originated from the same Cayman merchant processor that handled the unreported revenue. Trent shook his head violently. You can't prove where that came from. I already did, I replied. Agent Miller's attention sharpened. Destination. I turned slowly toward my father. A joint domestic checking account, registered to Richard and Martha Ashford. My mother's fingers slipped from the edge of the countertop. That was a gift, she whispered weakly. From Trent's business success. For the guest house renovation. Gift. I met her eyes. Federal law does not classify laundered offshore funds as gifts. My father recovered his voice. Even if that money came from his company, that doesn't make us criminals. We didn't know. Agent Miller spoke this time, tone clinical. Under Title 18, any domestic recipient of commingled laundered funds is subject to asset forfeiture pending investigation. My father blinked. Asset forfeiture? Yes. Miller replied evenly. Immediate freeze. I checked my watch. It happened at 8:30 this morning. The room went still. My accounts are not frozen. My father said quickly, almost angrily. I would have received a notification. Your brokerage portfolio? I asked. Silence. Your commercial real estate credit lines? I continued. His face drained of color. Your liquidity? I finished softly. No longer belongs to you. My father reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. His hands trembled as he opened his banking app. The screen loaded, then refreshed, then displayed the word every financial professional reads, Rest received, UNDR Federal Revidu. He stared at it as if it might change. It's temporary, he said weakly. Agent Miller didn't blink. It will remain restricted until the forensic audit concludes. My mother began to cry harder. Victoria, call them off. You're punishing us over a misunderstanding. I faced her fully. I did not initiate the audit. I said calmly. The data did. Trent finally snapped. You set this up, he shouted. You hacked everything? You wanted this? I tilted my head slightly. No, Trent. You set it up when you uploaded a compliance selfie holding my passport. He faltered. My father stepped forward, desperation replacing authority. Agent Miller, I will cooperate. I will provide statements. Just don't arrest my son in front of us. Agent Miller's voice turned colder. Sir, your son is facing charges including aggravated identity theft, wire fraud, tax evasion exceeding $500,000, and international money laundering. The words hung heavy. Trent's composure shattered completely. Wait, I can return the funds, he stammered. I have access to the wallets. I'll give you the private keys. You'll have time to discuss that, Miller replied, after processing. Special Agent Davis stepped forward with matte black steel cuffs. The metallic click echoed through the kitchen. One wrist, then the other. My mother collapsed into sobs. My father didn't move. He just stared at the floor where his leather checkbook had fallen earlier. Useless now. Trent's voice cracked as they turned him toward the foyer. Victoria, he whispered hoarsely. We're family. I looked at him without anger. Family doesn't forge passports and anchor felonies to your name. They escorted him out through the heavy oak doors. The house felt hollow. Agent Miller paused before leaving. A forensic audit team will arrive at your commercial offices tomorrow morning. He told my father. Do not attempt to move assets. My father nodded weakly. Then Miller turned to me. Based on preliminary review, the levy attached to your social security number will be suspended pending final clearance. Understood, I replied. When the agents left, silence swallowed the house. My mother sat on the floor, mascara streaked. My father looked 10 years older. I picked up my phone from the marble island. No triumph, no satisfaction, just equilibrium, because this wasn't revenge. It was correction. But as I walked toward the door, my father finally found his voice. You destroyed your own family. I paused. Without turning back, I said quietly, no. Data did. And I stepped outside into the morning light. But what none of them realized yet was that this investigation was about to go public. And when it did, the collapse wouldn't stay inside these walls. Collapse in broad daylight. 6 weeks later, the headlines began. Not front page national news, not yet, but regional financial bulletins, legal brief summaries, investor alerts. In my world, that's louder than a siren. Federal indictment filed in multi-million-dollar offshore tax evasion case. Local real estate investor under forensic audit. Series A startup collapses amid criminal probe. The story spread exactly the way white-collar implosions always do, quietly at first. Then all at once, Trent was formally indicted on multiple Class B felony counts, aggravated identity theft, commercial wire fraud, tax evasion exceeding $500,000, and international money laundering. The Department of Justice did not offer an early plea, because the biometric evidence was airtight, because the hardware match was undeniable, because the metadata never lies. Without access to traditional banking channels, or the offshore wallets that were now under federal seizure, Trent couldn't post the staggering bond amount. His investors vanished within days. Venture capital does not fund defendants. The leased matte black SUV was repossessed first, then his luxury apartment, then the illusion. My father's situation unraveled more slowly and more painfully. The IRS forensic audit team didn't just review the $250,000 transfer. They expanded outward. 5 years of commercial real estate acquisitions, partnership structures, depreciation schedules, capital gains filings. When federal auditors arrive with a mandate, they don't skim, they excavate. Under asset forfeiture statutes, the commingled funds in my parents' joint account triggered a broader liquidity restriction. Brokerage accounts frozen, lines of credit suspended. Ongoing property deals stalled mid-transaction. Legal retainers alone consumed 6 figures in weeks. The sprawling suburban estate, the one where I had stood calmly as my brother was cuffed, went on the market quietly. Not because they wanted to move, because they had to. My mother attempted to call me twice during that period. I did not answer. I wasn't angry. I was finished. The federal levy against my Social Security number was formally lifted within 10 business days of the hardware verification report. My accounts unlocked. My credit profile restored. My consulting firm's liquidity returned to operational stability. A brief official letter confirmed it. Primary taxpayer cleared. Identity fraud substantiated. Liability reassigned. 3 sentences. That was the only apology I required. Colleagues asked cautious questions. I answered minimally. In corporate environments, people understand one truth: financial contamination is contagious. I had removed myself from the blast radius. Privately, I filed for a permanent restraining order. It was granted without resistance. The court cited documented identity misuse and financial endangerment. Clean break. System closed. One afternoon, as I reviewed a risk assessment model for a Fortune 500 client, I paused for a moment, not because I felt regret, but because I recognized something. Trent had believed encryption was power. My father believed money was power. My mother believed loyalty was power. They were all wrong. Power is documentation. Power is traceability. Power is knowing that every digital action leaves a footprint, and knowing how to read it. They thought bloodline granted immunity. They thought reputation outweighed compliance. They thought I would sacrifice myself to preserve an image. Instead, I handed the system a flash drive. I did not destroy my family. I enforced accountability. Months later, the final forfeiture notices were issued. Portions of my parents' commercial holdings were liquidated to satisfy penalties. Trent remained in pre-trial custody, negotiating terms that would likely include years, not months, of federal supervision. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had chosen silence. If I had set up the payment plan, if I had absorbed the $500,000 liability quietly to protect family peace. But peace built on fraud is just delayed collapse. And I don't delay collapse. I analyze it, prevent it, or trigger it when necessary. Because in the end, this was never about revenge. It was about identity. And if someone anchored a criminal empire to your name, if they demanded you risk prison for their ambition, would you have protected them? Or would you have protected yourself? And if the choice came again, would I hesitate? The cost of a name. 3 months after the arrest, the house was no longer theirs. The for sale sign disappeared quietly, replaced by a pending contract notice that never made it into family group chats, because there was no group chat anymore. Federal cases move in phases. First shock, then denial, then negotiation, then consequences. Trent eventually accepted a plea agreement, not because he wanted to, because the evidence left no oxygen in the room. The biometric verification photo, the VPN billing telemetry, the MAC address permanently hard-coded into his laptop's network card, the 250,000 domestic wire transfer linking, laundered funds to my parents' joint account. It wasn't circumstantial. It was structural. He pled to multiple felony counts in exchange for reduced sentencing exposure, prison time, supervised release, restitution, permanent financial monitoring. His Series A round never happened. Investors do not fund defendants awaiting sentencing. My father's audit finalized shortly after. The government did not accuse him of orchestrating the scheme, but accepting and commingling laundered funds carries its own gravity. Civil penalties were assessed, back taxes recalculated, asset liquidation required to stabilize liabilities. The audit report was nearly 400 pages long. Ironically, I never asked to see it. I didn't need to. By then, the system had done exactly what it was designed to do. And me? I went back to work. Forensic reconstruction. Compliance architecture. Corporate fraud mitigation. Except now, When I lectured clients about identity infrastructure risk, I spoke from more than professional experience. I had lived the vulnerability, the terrifying moment when your name becomes a weapon, when a red banner freezes your life, when the people who should protect you ask you to sacrifice yourself instead. There's a misconception about white-collar crime that it's bloodless. It isn't. It bleeds reputation, it bleeds trust, it bleeds family. The hardest moment wasn't when the agents cuffed Trent. It wasn't when my father's accounts froze. It wasn't even when I saw my passport in that compliance selfie. The hardest moment was realizing they genuinely believed I would accept the fallout, that I would plead ignorance, set up installments, absorb felony exposure for peace. But peace built on silence is just self-destruction with better lighting. 6 months after everything concluded, I received one final letter from the Treasury confirming full clearance and permanent fraud annotation attached to my Social Security record, protective, not punitive. My identity now carried a shield. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sometimes replay that morning in my head, the green biometric login chime before the red banner appeared. It felt like a system glitch. It wasn't. It was exposure. Exposure of entitlement. Exposure of arrogance. Exposure of the dangerous belief that proximity equals immunity. If I had paid the 5 on 12 $450 quietly, the offshore accounts would have continued operating, the laundering would have scaled, the liability would have deepened, and eventually, the system wouldn't have seen a victim. It would have seen a participant. That's the part people don't understand. When your name is attached to the crime, silence becomes complicity. I didn't choose revenge. I chose separation from fraud, from manipulation, from the idea that family loyalty overrides federal law. Today, my accounts are clean, my firm is stronger, my credit profile is untouched, and my name, the one they tried to leverage, is intact. Because at the end of everything, identity is not just paperwork, it's sovereignty. So if someone anchored a criminal enterprise to your social security number, if they smiled and told you to relax while your life was frozen, would you have protected the relationship or the record? And if the next red banner ever flashes across your screen, will you panic or will you start collecting metadata?